Welcome, Hornets. This is part 3 of the review of chapter 1, where we are looking at the open-ended question. The open-ended question is asking us to find the x-intercepts, find the location of the relative minimum, and then identify intervals of either increase or decrease, and finally, identifying intervals of positive or negative. Regardless of what we're looking for, we have to start by graphing this. So we're going to want to put it into our graphing calculator. To put this into the graphing calculator, you're going to want to start with x to the power of is this caret button right here. And by hitting the caret button, you automatically put in the power. And we can now put in 4. To get out of the power, you move your right arrow, you put your minus 5x, and then you subtract the last value of 3. You should see in your calculator the same equation. X to the 4th minus 5x minus 3. Now we're going to hit zoom 6 to just get a good idea of it. Now we know that a quartic could have as many as three extrema. We currently see only 1. So I'm going to want to take just a moment to zoom out. So I'm going to go from negative 50 to positive 50 just to see if there are any extrema. Now remember, we could have other bumps. Those are the extrema. If we don't see any, we don't have to worry. You'll notice there's only 1. So I'm going to do zoom 6 and go back to the original graph, and I'm going to locate all of my x-intercepts. I'm going to locate the y-intercept. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plot the point for the relative extrema. So here we go. To find the zeros, we do second trace. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. Notice that 2 is 0. When we hit 2, it's going to put us on the axis, and you'll notice that we can clearly see our y-intercept there as 0, negative 3. Now we could have done that through the table. Lots of choices to find it. We could have also found our y-intercept. Either way, I'm set. I'm now going to have to find my x-intercept by going above, which is to the left, hitting enter, moving the right arrow down so I am below and to the right, hit enter, followed by enter and enter. And you'll notice that the value that I'm getting is negative 0.577721. Write the entire thing down, please. Only at the end are we going to round our values. That's when we actually start to write the question. We're then going to we found our y-intercept. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find my y-intercept again, just so you can see it. I hit value and I plug in 0, enter. And you'll notice I get the point at x equals 0. It is negative 3, and that's my y-intercept. To find the relative extrema, the minimum here, we're going to find minimum. That's 3. And once again, we want to be above and to the left. Hit enter. And then above and to the right, hit enter, followed by enter. We're going to want to write this entire point down on the graph that we've made, 1.0772179, comma, negative 7.039565. We're now going to find our second x-intercept by doing second trace, 2, and now we're going to be below to the right, to the left, and then above to the right, and hit enter. And we have 1.8757193, comma 0. So I'm now going to write these points down, and I'm going to start separating them to answer the question. So to answer the question of where are the zeros or find the locations of the zeros, I'm going to write the zeros are located at x equals negative 0.578. Notice I have rounded it. I could also truncate it, so they would accept x equals negative 0.577. Same with the second x-intercept. X equals 1.876, or I could have done 1.875. Now, if they ask you to justify your answer, you want to describe the graph. So what's happening at these points? The curve is going through the x-axis. Done. We're then going to take the point, the relative minimum. Now notice that this is where it is located at. This is what the actual minimum is. A minimum is the lowest y value. So the lowest y value on this graph is negative 7.040. I then write down each piece. The relative minimum is located at 1.077 rounded, and the relative minimum is negative 7.040. Now, in the next question, we're being asked to identify intervals of increase and or decrease. We always are working with the domain, and we're going from negative infinity to our minimum value. We're then going to go from the minimum value to positive infinity. Notice, this is the decreasing portion. This is the increasing portion of our graph. So here we go. F of x, because that's what it is. Otherwise, you have to call it the function or the graph of the function. F of x is decreasing on, and then we would put, we cannot reach negative infinity, so we're going to use parenthesis there. Watch out for that. Unless I almost made a classic mistake. And I'm going to this value, 1.077. And I use a bracket. This is because, now you have to decide. Now on the actual question, I put the actual answer. I gave you the definition of what it means to decrease. That each successive y value is smaller than the preceding y value. Okay, all the way until that last point. But it's just as easy to say because all of the y values are getting smaller. That's what I'm going to write. All of the y values are getting smaller. Don't say all of the y values are decreasing. That would be redundant and you wouldn't get credit. For the increasing interval, we want the other half. So f of x is increasing on, we're now going to start with 1.077 and go to positive infinity. This is because, once again, you could use the definition, all of the following y values after 1.077 are growing in value, or you could say that between any 2 points on the interval, there is a positive slope. I'm just going to write because all of the y values are growing. Once again, I'm just describing what I see on the graph. Now, the last question is asking me to identify the intervals where this function has negative values. Negative values are in between. Notice they go all the way across, but 0 is not negative. 0 is not a negative value. It is not a positive value. It is a neutral value. It is an even number, but it's not positive or negative. So when we write our negative interval from x value to x value, once again, domain, we want to make sure we do not include the 0. F of x is negative. Let me make sure you can see it. On, we're going to use parenthesis, and we use our first x-intercept, negative 0.578, comma, 1.876, comma. Why? Because the y values are below the x-axis. After all, that's what makes a negative. See how all of the values on that interval are below the x-axis except at those zeros. If we were doing the positives, we'd go from negative infinity to that x value in union with the x value to positive infinity. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Hornets, for your time and watching this. I hope it helped.